Well, I'd really never pictured myself as a literature evangelist. I wasn't really a talkative individual. I always pictured literature evangelists being people that talked all the time. My real decisive moment for coming into the publishing work actually came when I was a student. And I had taken theology and thought I wanted to be a pastor, but I began to wonder if the pastoral ministry was right for me. The pastors do a great work, but a lot of the work seemed to be internal to the church, and I wanted to do something that reached out a little more. And in the meantime, I had a friend that just talk about publishing. That's all he could talk about. And he said, "Oh, you ought to canvas, you ought to canvas, you ought to canvas." And so he came around again, and the man called me up, and I said, "Okay, I'll be a student literature evangelist." And I'd practiced my door approach. I went from house to house to house, and I was in a neighborhood, and nobody was at home. I knocked for about 2 hours, and nobody answered the door. And finally, a lady answered the door, and there I stood. And I began my presentation, my door approach, and she interrupted me. I'd never had anybody interrupt me when I practiced in front of the mirror. Everything left my mind. I didn't know one word. I stood there and stared at the lady, and she stared at me. And after a little while, she got tired of staring, and she closed the door. And I walked down that sidewalk the most defeated person I've ever been, knowing I was never going to be a literature evangelist. But when I kept on knocking, and finally another lady answered the door, she invited me in. I knew all I had to do was get the machine plugged in. And so I got inside, and I went over to plug the machine, and I got so nervous I couldn't plug it in, and I invited her, "Would you mind coming over and plugging this machine in for me?" And she did. She plugged it in, and the machine gave its little presentation. And afterwards, the lady looked at me and she said, "I want to thank you for coming. I'm going to get these books from you." She said, "God sent you here today." And that was the first time in my life that I ever really knew that God had used me in something. I knew that I was in a ministry that obviously I wasn't that talented. I'd messed up everything so far, but God had still used me in it. And there was something that clicked inside of me that said, I want to do that again. I want to feel that same thing inside of me, to know that I'm God's person in God's place in God's time. And from that point forward, I just kept going. I wanted that experience one more time, to know that God was using me on a day-by-day basis. And He still uses me today, and I'm thankful for that. The literature ministry is a special ministry. Our job is to go out and reach people that would not be reached probably in any other way. When we go into the people's homes, we have to understand that we may be the only representative of Jesus that they'll see. And so we try to make it our goal as literature evangelists, number one, to represent Jesus. To whatever they get books or they don't get books, we want them to be closer to Jesus and see more about Jesus, because we've been there in their home and visited with them. And so we try and represent that in a very Christian way. And the next thing I think about is this person's got to make a decision about the future in their life. My visit here today may determine the decision they make for eternity. Quite often I'm asked about publishing ministry and how it fits into the history and the last days. And people tell me all the time, what about books? People don't really read books. Books are a thing of the past and different things like that. But the reason I do literature evangelism is because I believe the promise. I believe the spirit of prophecy. I believe what Ellen White says, that it's going to play a very, very important place in the last time. And I believe that if she could write the story again, she wouldn't write it one bit different than what she did, despite all the satellites, despite all the other methods we have, and every method's important. However we can reach people for Jesus, we need to be doing it. But in the last days, I believe publishing is going to shine in a very special way. Television, broadcast, and all of those, they're going to be taken off the air. They won't be broadcasting. As far as I know, even our hospitals may be closed. But books have been placed in people's homes. Thousands and thousands and thousands of books are in people's homes. And one thing you can't do is repossess 1 million books. At times people think it's getting smaller and smaller, but the day will come and it's going to turn around. It has to turn around, because I believe the promise, and it's been promised that. And I know it's going to happen. And so I look forward to the future for literature evangelism. And I praise the Lord for the past and what's still remaining, that's still working in people's homes each and every day. And so I believe literature ministry is more important than it's ever been before in the world's history. It hasn't lost value, it's gained value as far as what it's going to accomplish. And I believe our best days are ahead of us as far as the power of the printed page.